Okay, so we're going to talk about health. And this is a slide that looks at the mortality rates for the 20th century. And it's specifically looking at infectious disease mortality rates, but it would apply to general mortality rates as well. And what's interesting about this is that there's never been a graph like this in the history of our species. That is, in 1 century, to see such a dramatic decline in the death rates of our population. And the question is, to what can we attribute this? And the answer is, to a small part, to medical care, and I'll go over that, to a very large part, public health, clean water, safe food, and to a significant part, what you do for yourselves. And as we've reduced the mortality rate dramatically, the impact of public health has remained static and the impact of medical care has grown, but the impact upon what you can do for yourselves has tremendously grown. And so that will be the emphasis of what I speak with you about today. This looks at it in a different way, and that is, these are different curves for different times for people in the United States in terms of longevity. And as I think you're all aware, we are living a lot longer today, in the red, year 2000, compared to 100 years ago, and even compared to 50 years ago and 30 years ago. We're living longer. So we're living longer. What can we attribute this to? In the past, the idea was that to make sure we were over here, as opposed to over here, we counted on our doctors to do everything for us. That we counted on our doctors to get us well when we were sick, and to do what he or she could do for us to preserve our well-being. Today, that really looks differently. There are lots of things that we can do to maintain our health that include what our physicians do, but they include a lot of other things. They include what our health habits are. They may or may not include what supplements we take. They certainly include what we eat and if we exercise or not. And they do include the advances in diagnostics that tie together with what your physician can do for you. So the model is different today than it was when I was growing up, and that was the doctor was the center between you and death or morbidity and health. And today there's lots of things that play a role. The determinants of health from a public health standpoint are these 5 features: your genetic predisposition, or as I would say, picking your parents well, behavior patterns, environmental exposures, social circumstances, and health care. And you might ask yourselves, what percentage each of these play in your lives, do you think, in terms of the import for you to remain healthy? And the answers may surprise you. This looks at the premature mortality proportions, and this is the pie. So where do you think each of these might lie on the pie? I'll show you. Genetics accounts for perhaps 30%. And we don't have a lot of control, at least today, on our genetics. We have some drugs that can influence the genetic manifestations of genes in terms of what our bodies make and how we can alter that, but we don't have a lot of influence over that. Behavior is the largest piece of the pie, accounting for close to half of it. What our behaviors are. Social and environmental account for a smaller piece, and healthcare accounts for maybe 10% of the determinants of our health. So, yes, healthcare remains very important, but it is tremendously subordinated to something like behavior. So it's behavior that I'd like to focus on today in terms of what you can do in your behavior to not only increase the length of time you live, but just as importantly, if not more so, the quality of those years. These are the 10 leading causes of death in the United States, with number 1 being diseases of the heart, and number 10 being chronic liver disease. These are all terribly important in terms of causes of death. But if we look at this a little differently, in terms of what we can do for each of these 10 things, we see that we have a lot of control over the 10 leading causes of death. to prevent diseases of the heart, diet, exercise, and if needed, medications. To prevent cancer, we know that diet plays a role, and there's some evidence that exercise may play a role as well. Cerebrovascular disease, again, diet, exercise, and medications. Cerebrovascular disease meaning strokes. Chronic lung disease, stop smoking. Accidents, education. Accidents don't just happen, they happen because of something we did or didn't do, or somebody did or didn't do to us. And further down the list, pneumonia and influenza, stop smoking, and vaccines. Diabetes, diet and exercise. Suicide, therapy, medication sometimes. Kidney failure, medications, diet, exercise. And finally, chronic liver disease, education, especially when it relates to hepatitis C and hepatitis B, vaccine for B, and also alcohol. So the 10 leading causes of death in the United States, and we have major things that we can do for each of these. And as you see from this list, though, that most of the things are on us to do them, as opposed to what your doctor can do for you. There are things like vaccine, medication, and so on, but other things like stopping smoking, what you're eating, exercising, these are things under your control. So here's some trends in American health. We're getting older, we're getting fatter, we're getting lazier. Things are fairly well established, and I'll go over that briefly. But we're having fewer heart attacks and strokes, and fewer of us are dying from cancer, and we're becoming a supplementing society. So these 6 things I'd like to dilate on very briefly with you. And you'll see, taking supplements. Yeah. So in terms of getting older, I showed you that graph earlier. This just looks at 1990 versus 2001 versus 2050 projected. And you see that the numbers are dramatically increasing. This is in the percentage of the population over 65 years of age. So we are seeing a dramatic and unprecedented change in the demography of our country. We're getting fatter. 2 out of every 3 adults in the United States are currently classified as either overweight or obese. And in the 1960s, this number was about 25%. So we've gone from about 25% to 66, 67% in a period of about 40 years. 1 out of every 8 school-age children are now considered obese. This is twice the number that it was 35 years ago. It's estimated that being overweight or obese contributes to around 300,000 excess deaths a year in the United States. And if these trends continue, obesity is going to overtake cigarette smoking or smoking as the leading cause of preventable death in the United States. And smoking is an enormous factor. So what is being overweight and being obese? We use the body mass index, which is a calculation that is shown here. But that's somewhat cumbersome. It's easier to use a table. And I think we have a table for you that you can use to calculate your BMI. And if your body mass index is between 18.5 and 25, you're considered normal weight. If it's below 18.5, you're considered too thin. And where we get that too thin idea is because the mortality rates and morbidity rates start to go up if your BMI is below 18.5. If your BMI is between 25 and roughly about 30, you're considered overweight. And if you're above 30, you're considered obese. Now, there are exceptions to that. People massively muscular like me. Now, like Arnold, for example. His BMI would be high, but he certainly is not obese. But his, I think, BMI was calculated at 32 or so. So there are exceptions to this rule. In general, average people like all of us in this room, these numbers are pretty good. So you might take a look at what your BMI is. The problem, in part, relates to this. We live in what has been described as a toxic food environment. And the problem from the food industry's perspective is that we're producing, and this is also unprecedented, around 3,800 kilocalories per person per day, which is nearly twice as much as what we need. So what do we do with that other half of the kilocalories that we're producing? And if you were a food industry executive, you'd say, we got to find a way to increase demand. And that's what's been done. We have had subtle and not too subtle messages from the food industry encouraging us to eat more. This is just some data on this. We know that fast food stores, vending machines, all are larger proportions of food and restaurant use, commercials, food commercials, these have all dramatically increased. Between 1988 and 1999, the number of dollars spent for advertising rose by 28% for candy and 40% for snacks, and for restaurants by 86%. And that's in a 11-year period of time. And the money spent on advertising on any new single product is often greater than the total spent every year by public health to educate us about diet. So from a public health person's perspective, they're 364 times better than me in terms of getting the message out. And that's one of the big problems. And this just looks at the portion size. This is from JAMA in 2003, and this would be 1977, 78, 1989, 91, and 1994, 98, showing you that for these categories of food, that in general the portion sizes have steadily stepped up. So today what we're used to seeing as a normal portion is much larger than it was 20 years ago. The food industry is the second largest advertiser next to the auto industry in the United States. This says, it's not just compared to the table, damn it, this is a small portion. So you might say, well, what about the USDA? Why aren't they protecting us from this toxic food environment? And the problem is that the USDA is charged with two things. One is to promote the U.S. agricultural products, which translates to eating more. The other is to give advice about diet and health, which in the world we're currently living in would mean eating less. So this is an inherent conflict that the agency has. And so we get a lot of conflicted messages like, instead of aim for a BMI between 18.5 and 25, aim for a healthy weight. Instead of avoiding empty calories and listing what those are, choose beverages and foods to moderate your intake of sugar. So it's trying to balance what its job is to promote U.S. agriculture, and it's also trying to balance what's good for our health. And we get very mixed messages. Yes?
It seems to me there's a difference between U.S. agriculture and the food industry. Agriculture produces basic foods. I mean, if we ate a lot of those, we'd probably be fine.
Well, under the USDA also comes cattle, meat, and so on.
Yeah, but still, it seems like it's the foods that are processed that are...
Right. You're absolutely right. We perhaps we'll get a chance to talk about that in terms of what are some healthy foods, and I know Trish will certainly chat about that. But what I'm focusing on primarily here is the excess, as opposed to quality. I mean, not as opposed to, but including quality. You're absolutely right. So what's wrong with being overweight? Increased incidence of coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, diabetes type 2, and some cancers. So no question that being overweight is a public health problem. And tied to that, and clearly tied to that, is the fact that we're lazier. This is a Gallup poll in 2003 that looked at the number of U.S. adults who reported regular, vigorous exercise. 20 minutes of activity that produces a surge in the heart rate declined by 45% from 52% in 2001. So we are exercising less. Currently, the majority, 54% of Americans, are now considered sedentary or of very low activity. This looks at some of the parameters for this. At the top are millions of person miles in automobiles. Between 1970 and 1990 have steadily increased. We're spending a lot more time in cars, we're spending a lot more time watching TV, and we're spending a lot more time in a sedentary work environment. And this translates to, in a 20-year period of time, roughly about an 800 kilocalorie per day decrease in the amount we're burning off. So if we were eating the same things we were 20 years ago, we'd still be putting on weight because 3,500 kilocalories makes a pound. So roughly about, what, a little over 4 days, you got a pound. The average child today in the United States, it's estimated, spends approximately 40 hours a week either watching television or at the computer or in a sedentary position listening to iPods and things like that. 40 hours a week. Whereas when I was growing up, as soon as you got home from school, you went outside and played. That's a big difference in the way we're living. So who do we have to blame? This says, the secret to success is knowing who to blame for your failures. Good news. There are fewer of us who are having heart attacks and strokes. This is 1970 compared to 1998. For heart attacks, you see the decline from 400 per 100,000 to 170. And the same thing for strokes, 1970 and 1998, 150 to 60. So a major decline in heart attacks and strokes. Very good news. And if this decline hadn't taken place, there'd be about 250,000 people a year dying of strokes and heart attacks. Strokes, and 815,000 dying of heart attacks, in excess of what we're currently seeing. So this is a major advance in terms of longevity and quality. There have also been fewer cancer deaths, at least in the big four. These are the four most likely cancers to kill us in the United States: colon, lung, breast, and prostate. And every one of these has declined in terms of mortality rates. So that's been extremely encouraging. And we can talk a little bit about why that's happened, hopefully. And finally, per your question, we're becoming a supplementing society. In 1970, very few people took supplements, and herbs were essentially unheard of in the United States. Today, almost half the population takes a multivitamin, and about a quarter say they've used herbal supplements. There are close to 30,000 dietary supplements available to the American consumer. And this is a very big industry. No one's sure exactly how big it is. This is 1996, it was estimated to be $6.5 billion. Today it's somewhere between $18 and $36 billion a year in supplements. This was a Harris poll done in 2002 that asked the American public questions about supplements. 55% believe that a vitamin and mineral supplement would help prevent aging. 44% believe that herbal supplements help prevent aging. 68% believe that U.S. government required dietary supplements to carry warnings about possible side effects. And 59% believe that dietary supplements must be approved by a governmental agency before they could be sold to the American public. The answer to all of these, all four of these, is false. None of these are true. And we can attribute this to this infamous act by the U.S. Congress signed by the President called the DSHEA, or the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, which sounds like a great act by its title. But what it essentially did was it freed manufacturers from proving their supplements are safe. If you buy a prescription product or an OTC product that's approved by the FDA, it means that the people who made that product had to prove that it was both safe and efficacious before it could be sold to you. It also had to prove that what they claimed was in that pill or in that liquid. What the DSHEA did was it put the burden on the U.S. government to prove something was not safe and was not efficacious. That is, I could make any claims I wanted. And it allowed people to make any claims they want, and allows people to make any claims they want, essentially, about these products. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So, for example, what a dietary supplement label can and can't say. It can say that it can improve mood, but it can't say it treats a disease like depression. It can say it maintains a healthy circulatory system. It can't say that it prevents cardiovascular disease. So it can't make what are called structure-function claims, but it can make claims about general vague things. Now, I can't see much difference between the left-hand and the right-hand columns here, and neither can the American public, but these are the kind of claims that the government allows people to make thanks to that DSHEA Act. So you have to be very, very, very careful in buying these products. So what can we do? Lifestyle changes, screening, immunizations, and advanced directives. I'm not going to talk about the latter, but that's terribly important. So in terms of lifestyle issues, if you do nothing else, stop smoking, because that's the gorilla in the room. If anybody smokes, that's the most important thing they can do before they're worried about diet, exercise, and anything else, because that's what's going to likely kill you. I had so many patients over the years who would come in and say, who would be smokers, and they come in worried about their cholesterol and worried about their diabetes and worried about other things when the gorilla is the smoking. So that's number one. Exercise is terribly important, and Trish will talk to us a little bit about that. Nutrition, hopefully we'll have time to get into that in terms of what's healthy. As you were saying, fruits and vegetables, absolutely. And not to forget about dentition, taking care of your teeth. Because if you don't have your teeth, you're not going to eat a healthy diet. This says, please ask the people at the next table to stop talking about smoking. And screening tests that you and your doctor can do. Make sure you have your blood pressure checked regularly, your cholesterol, total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglycerides checked at least every 5 years after the age of 30. Osteoporosis screens all women over the age of 50, or at least at the time of menopause. Colorectal cancer screening, terribly important. This is why we're having less deaths from colorectal cancer. Not a very pleasant test, having somebody look up your colon, but very effective. Breast cancer, colon cancer screening can prevent colon cancer by removing benign tumors. Breast cancer screening cannot prevent breast cancer with mammography, but it can detect early, which saves lives. Cervical cancer screening can prevent cervical cancer by identifying cells that are not yet malignant and removing those. And prostate cancer screening, like breast cancer, cannot prevent the disease, but it can detect it early, and you can have the cancer treated, and you won't die from it. And skin cancer checking is very important. The two cancers that are increasing, I told you that colon, prostate, breast, and lung have been decreasing in terms of mortality rates. The two cancers that are increasing in our society are melanoma, a skin cancer, which is often fatal, and the other is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we don't know why either of those are increasing. And not to forget vision screening, primarily for glaucoma, which is a silent disease, and by the time you notice a change in your vision, it's permanent. So you need to be screened for that. And your hearing too, because if you lose your hearing, you become isolated. This says, I'm sorry, we've had to drop the traditional last cigarette on account of complaints from the firing squad about secondhand smoke. And finally, immunizations. Please avail yourselves of these. They are very helpful in preventing morbidity and mortality. Influenza every year. You cannot get the flu from the influenza vaccine. It's not possible. Pneumonia or the pneumococcal vaccine after the age of 65, or if you have any diabetes or chronic lung or heart disease, it probably one time is probably sufficient. The diphtheria tetanus shot that we all get every 10 years remains very important, but just recently we've combined it with what's called the acellular pertussis or whooping cough vaccine. And it's turned out that adults, my age and your age, are often the reservoir for whooping cough, and it gives us the classic, what's called the 100-day cough, which is very aggravating, which none of us would want. But we are the reservoir to give it to children who can die from this disease. So now we should get the DP, it's called the DTAP, and the brand new vaccine against shingles for people 60 and over, which is very exciting. It was approved this summer. And if you're traveling to parts of the world that may require immunizations, please get them and take malaria prophylaxis as well. This says, I figure if I don't have that third martini, the terrorists win. So I'll end with this. This is Pandora opening her box and letting out all the evils of the world, and she finally closed it and left one thing in the box. Hope, right? So I'll close with hope.
Thank you. Well, one of the very first things that you can customize these general guidelines, eat better, exercise more, stop smoking, you can customize them to yourself by taking what's called a health risk assessment. And probably most of you have taken that, and partly that's why we're here today. But what the health risk assessment can do is really provide you with that roadmap about what are your specific health risks and help you then be motivated towards changing and prioritize what do you need to change in terms of your lifestyle behaviors. And just in case you haven't already seen this, in our working with this UC Living Well initiative, there are incentives to taking the health risk assessment, and Blue Cross has just added a $50 incentive if any of you are Blue Cross members. That is going to be retroactive to January 1st. So anyone who has participated throughout this whole year, there's a $50 incentive with Blue Cross, a $25 with HealthNet, and Pacific Care has just added a $25 incentive plus 2,500 health credits. So there's a little bit of a motivation, and that this is a direction employers are going, is trying to help employees take care of themselves. How do you find these health risk assessment tools? You can certainly go to the UC Living Well page that's on our campus, or you can go to At Your Service for the UC Living Well page, and you can find the direct links and the information to the health risk assessment. So what I want to tell you a little bit about is, so now that you've taken your health risk assessment, you know what you want to do. Most of us know what we want to do. It's doing it. That's the hard part, and changing habits isn't easy. So what Health Matters tries to do is offer you the tools in which you can develop new habits and in small steps. And one of the first things that we do is, in terms of exercise, is we have a Step Up to Fitness workshop. It helps you use a pedometer, which is a little step counter, trying to achieve 10,000 steps a day. What's very effective about a pedometer is if you are currently not active, it's a way then to fit fitness into your life without having to set aside an extra 30 minutes. That tends to be a barrier. The minute we think about, I have to go to the gym or I have to set aside time, a lot of us don't have that time. So pedometer helps you fit it into your day by counting steps and working towards 10,000 steps a day, which is equivalent in benefit to about a 30-minute activity, which is just our barest minimum recommendation. If you're already working out, you spend an hour a day walking briskly, going for a bike ride, whatever the activity is, you're doing great. You're doing above and beyond. At this Step Up to Fitness class, not only do we talk about how to use a pedometer, but we teach also strength and stretching routines so that you can make your own self-paced workout. And there's a class coming up on February 20th, as well as it's always the third Tuesday of every month. And we can also come into your department and do anything from a 15-minute version of the workshop to the hour. We also have on campus the Health Matters Walking Group, which meets every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the Campanile. Those of you that are on this end of campus are very close, and that might be convenient for you if you come once a week or all 3 times. Social support, whether you find an exercise buddy or come to the group to find the social support, is also another very effective means to have you stay committed to exercise. And we hope to roll out in just another month or so a new incentive program, which helps some people kickstart, and keeps you motivated when you get small rewards. In addition, Rec Sports just rolled out their free 30-day pass to come try if the gym, exercising at a health club is part of what you're interested in. It's a way to try Rec Sports. And also just lots of times we get comments, why doesn't the university support or subsidize the Rec Sports fee? And that would be nice, but just don't let that be a barrier, because the Rec Sports monthly fee at $35 is a bargain compared to outside facilities. So really, even if without being subsidized further, they've really done a great job at keeping the cost low. So those are some ways you can get active, and we'll talk a little bit about what your health plan offers as well. What you can do about eating, we've got a couple exciting tools. One is Dr. Gladys Block, who is also from our School of Public Health and an esteemed nutrition professor, has developed a program that's a 12-week interactive email program that begins with, it's called Alive, a lifestyle intervention via email, and you can put in your diet. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and you get a personalized assessment right back without joining the program. You get that instant assessment. Then you can select whether you want to take part in the 12-week program. And then if you participate in that, during the emails that you receive, they're customized to what you put in your assessment. So it's a bit more tailored to you as an individual to help you identify what are those nutrition priorities. And you can I loved your slides, John, because what you showed is that increase in calories. I don't know if you guys caught that real quick, but soda is one of the biggest rises in those calories, and portion sizes. Two significant changes. If we just drank more water, less empty calories would be significant, and reduced our portion sizes, begun to shrink them back down to more modest portions. Those are significant changes. And then there's things you can add to your diet for really a healthy heart. The monounsaturated fats, olive oil and canola oil, and nuts are really important to add back in, and not to go too far in the elimination of all fats, because we need some fats. Some other tools that we have to help you, the Heart Smart Nutrition Workshop, the dietitian who's teaching that for us will go into more details about what is the right combination of fats in particular, and fiber. We need to eat more whole grains. And that's offered twice coming up this semester. We also have an Eat Smart Get Fit class that's offered every semester. It's an 8-week class that really takes you through the behavior change process with both a registered dietitian and a personal trainer. You get a nutrition assessment, a fitness assessment, a pedometer, and 8 weeks at Rec Sports. There is a fee for the class, and that's really for the person who needs that kind of coaching through, the professional help. You don't feel like you've been successful on your own, to really make permanent changes. Our overall driver for Health Matters is to make permanent changes in the way that you eat and live and be active, rather than temporary diets. Because studies show over and over, you can go on a diet, you can lose weight, but within a year, most people put that back on. So changing more long-term in small increments is much more effective, and that's the direction that we try to promote. John spoke about stopping smoking. A couple resources. We have free quick kits if you or your colleagues need help. We partner with the City of Berkeley, and there's a class coming up in March. We put information out. In March, we also have our workshop, Ready to Quit and How, so that if you're, again, you or a colleague needs some help figuring out what's the right method for me. Quitting smoking is probably the hardest behavior change because it's an addiction, and it takes several times often, but some people quit cold turkey, some need a group support, some need telephone counseling. There's lots of options on how to get help with that. So real quickly, just with your health plans, and all this that I'm covering is in the materials we've given you, as well as on the back table. Members of Blue Cross, has several online programs, very good, excellent smoking cessation program, some nutrition programs, and then they often negotiate discounted fees for pretty quality programs. That's been my sense of Blue Cross. HealthNet is also incentivizing their members to take action. So not only do you get $25 for the health risk assessment, but you can get $40 for participating in one of 5 programs. One is a 13-week fitness program. So for example, if you're a HealthNet member, you can print their tracking sheet or track online, use the walking group as your social support to make yourself get out there and earn a reward for it. They have a similar online, HealthNet and Kaiser have similar nutrition programs that are online by the same vendor called Health Media, and the programs are called Balance and Nourish, and those are both available. It's just HealthNet members get a little incentive. And they have the free and clear telephone smoking cessation program is also very good. Kaiser's always had good programs. If you go on site, they now have several online programs. The Balanced Nutrition program in particular, I've seen it previewed where you have your choice of a psychologist or a dietitian or one other health professional that is your coach, and it's a computerized type of a person that helps follow you, and they have great programs on site as well. And last, Pacific Care has more of a virtual health club type model. You can track your activity, whether it be working out at Rec Sports or tracking your steps. Similarly with the nutrition program, it's more of a program where you track your participation. And then they also have the free and clear smoking cessation program and have waived their fee for our Berkeley members. So the health plans are trying to help support where we're headed and trying to improve our behaviors. So that was very quick. Again, there's materials, everything's on paper hopefully, and we want to open it up to questions, probably mostly for you. But I'll be happy to answer any as well.
On the pie chart where it's talking about factors that affect your health, what is considered in the social side?
Thank you. The question is, what is considered in social? That's a very interesting question, and it gets to this area of public health called social determinants of disease. And it's probably a much bigger piece than people realize. For example, it would include things like where we live, in terms of the ability to walk to places. For example, suburbia, which sounds like it would be a very healthy place to live, we usually have to drive to get to a grocery store, as opposed to being in the inner city when you would walk. People in New York City are the biggest walkers in the United States. It would also include things like your job, what kind of work you're doing. A bus driver, for example, is under tremendous stress constantly in a sitting position, totally sedentary. And so there's increased morbidity in terms of hypertension, in terms of back problems. And then there's this more vague thing that appears consistently in the literature about social determinants of disease, and that is socioeconomic class and health. And what data has shown in public health for a long time is that the better your social economic class, independent of any variable we can think about, correlates linearly with your health status. And so there's something about being a lower socioeconomic class and having increased morbidity and mortality. And we can't tease out what those factors or factor is or are or is. Yes?
I have a question about the fat content in women. And I've seen, different kinds of charts, and there are different ways of measuring your fat content. Could you just comment on that? I mean, I realize
Probably
that...
Trish can too. Women have more body fat than males, which has interesting implications. Therefore, the BMI is going to likely not be quite as high in a female as a male because less muscle. But it also has implication in terms of alcohol, for example, because there's fat cells store a lot of water, and alcohol gets deposited in fat cells. So women can't tolerate quite as well the same amount of alcohol as males can. You're asking more generally, I'm not sure.
Well, I've seen that like men are usually below 20%, and recently in one of the newspaper magazines, it said that women should be like around 22%, and I mean that's a very lean young woman, and I am nowhere close to 22%.
Yeah.
And also how to measure, what's the best way
to
measure it?
There are a variety of ways to measure
because
it. You can measure it in water tanks, which displacement. You can measure it in terms of calipers, which is less accurate, but it roughly gives you a good sense in terms of the amount of subcutaneous tissue. Those are traditional ways to measure it. Women are supposed to have more body fat than males. I'm not sure.
There's nothing I can think of to add.
No, it's just reducing my body fat. That's
Well, your body fat is not necessarily bad as long as it's not in excess.
And the hip waist circumference is one of the
Thank you,
newer
yeah.
measurements that, Cynthia, I don't know if you want to, if anything comes to mind that you've been reading up more and more about the metabolic syndrome, but if your waist is significantly larger, I mean, we know men put on body fat, a lot of men. Women that put on body fat that is more like a man tend to have higher heart disease risk than women who tend to be larger all over.
It's the old apple and pear. You'd rather be an apple than a pear.
No pear.
A pear than an apple, excuse me, yeah.
Other questions? Did you all take your health risk assessment?
I found the body mass index where they ask your height and your weight, but I know there was a more extensive one. I'm on Kaiser.
Okay. The Kaiser one, you have to follow the instructions. Yes. If you go to our campus UC Living Well page off of the Health Matters Index page, and you'll see right next to the Kaiser, the text there, it says, please use these instructions. It unfortunately is kind of buried, and it takes about 10 steps to find it. And so that's why we wrote those instructions and why we're sending you to our page right now, not so much the At Your Service page, because right now the At Your Service website doesn't have that level of detail.
I
Hopefully
tried to
that will
use the Blue
change.
Cross over the weekend, and you had to sign in first, and I couldn't do it. Wouldn't
Yeah,
allow
we're
me.
hitting, now if you,
Yeah,
well, there's a few technical problems. So if you've just upgraded to Internet Explorer 7.0, is that your case? That is definitely the problem. Apparently, we're still trying to figure this out exactly how to fix it. But if you have Internet Explorer 7.0, it is embedded in their new application are security settings. And so it's preventing you from logging in and extremely hard to figure out.
I
But
got really frustrated and
yes,
called.
I know. I'm so sorry. It's so frustrating. But check our website. Give me about another week and a half because we're trying to identify exactly. Apparently, there's just some setting you can change and it'll fix the problem. But we haven't quite gotten there yet in terms of we have to replicate the problem first. I need a guinea pig, so I might be on your computer. But the Internet Explorer is the first problem, and disabling your block-up poppers. These are, this is part of the pilot, and we're learning a lot of things. It's been kind of frustrating, but a lot of people have gotten through. That's the good news. That is the good news. We definitely have some stats.
Why, since this program is a UC program, why did we have to go through our healthcare? Why couldn't you just have provided us the risk assessment for all of us across the board to get directly from UC?
Okay, I don't know if everybody heard the question, but the question is why are we going through the health plans rather than why isn't UC directly providing a health risk assessment? That's an excellent question, and it's certainly most employers, what they do in order to, this is all a cost control measure because if they can help, the larger healthcare costs can be managed, it means our premiums hopefully will stay steady, hopefully won't go up. We'd be very fortunate if they went down. And then it helps you manage your own out-of-pocket costs. So most employers are finding good success with these, and in fact, they're doing just that. They contract with a third-party vendor, so they're paying. There's only like 5 main vendors that have these health risk assessments, and they subcontract with the one that they choose, and they pay them directly, and then that's the model. That's the ideal model. Well, you see, Office of the President, this was a decision that they made in this first year, this rollout. They're already paying the health plans to provide the health risk assessment. It's part of the contract. And so this first year, the effort was just, let's see if the health plans can deliver on what we're paying for, as well as let's begin to raise awareness around the issue. In fact, I hope within a year or two we will go to the right model, and there's several of us that are championing for that. We've brought in other experts. Stanford, for example, their health improvement program is just excellent, and Wes Alice down there is just an expert in all of this, and we brought him in as a consultant, but they're just not quite there yet. Hope to get there. I hope so.
There's so many inequalities about people's ability
Oh,
to get in and access it.
I know, and it's really hard. Exactly, and it's very hard for me, with Health Matters I want to be a part of this, and I want the pilot, but I don't want it to reflect bad on us, and so it's challenging. It's definitely challenging, and I don't think anybody anticipated some of these little glitches, and it's been on a fast track. Never seen anything move so fast from Office of the President. It's been on a 6 months. We started in the summer and had to make this happen, and that is just unprecedented.